afternoon. Major apologies for the crowds. It's Columbia and it's really difficult to get space. We're really happy to welcome you into our space, which is the Institute for Research on Women, Gender, and Sexuality. And so happy to have Rosi Braidotti with us. I'm not surprised at the wonderful response. Please tell everybody the lecture is being taped. It will be up on our website quite soon. Rosi Braidotti is here until March 9th?
End of March, well,
yes,
teaching
the 10th. A mini seminar in ICLS. You can look that up online, and I think you...
we have more auditors than people registered, so keep on coming.
Yeah, so if you'd like to go and audit, it's on our website, and it's on the website of ICLS. In fact, on behalf of the Institute for Comparative Literature and Society and Earwigs, the Institute for Research on Women, Gender, and Sexuality, I'm so happy to welcome Rosi Braidotti to Columbia and to our institute. As you all know, Rosi Braidotti is probably the leading figure on European feminism today. She was the founder of the Netherlands Research School of Women's Studies, and she's currently Distinguished University Professor at Utrecht University and the founding director of its Center for the Humanities, which is a really, really lively center. She's the holder of innumerable honors and prizes from Australia to Poland to Finland and beyond. But she was also honored with a royal knighthood from Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands in 2006. And I just think it's so wonderful to have a royal knight and to have her be a feminist. Rosi Braidotti's work in feminist philosophy in social and political theory has over the last decades attempted to reconceive the subject from the perspective of the concept of difference. More specifically, and in conversation with Lucie Rigaray, with Italian feminist philosophy, with the work of Gilles Deleuze and others, she has over 4 important books worked out ways to think difference positively rather than in opposition to sameness. The books that I'm speaking about are Patterns of Dissonance, 1991, Nomadic Subjects, 1994, with a second edition, 2011, Metamorphoses Towards a Materialist Theory of Becoming in 2002, and Transpositions on Nomadic Ethics in 2006. More recently still, she published Nomadic Theory, 2011, and The Posthuman in 2013, as well as numerous edited volumes, and probably many other books that I've forgotten. Just to say, some of the books are on sale outside. Book Culture is here, and during our reception afterwards, you will have a chance to purchase them. So from difference focusing on gender, Braidotti's books have come to consider ethnic, cultural, and European differences, and more recently, as you will see today, differences between human and non-human, meaning animal, environmental, and technological others. What if we begin with difference and diversity? She asks. Take it as a place to start, always situating her thinking in the context of contemporary neoliberalism and globalization. Her inspiring commitment to producing socially and politically engaged scholarship has led Rosi Braidotti to rethink subjectivity and relation, to reconceive moral empathy and understanding for our contemporary moment. She really aims to produce a theory for our present. And thus she moves us toward not just the post-human, but the post-humanities that can make a genuine difference in our world today, and we certainly need it. Her title of her lecture today is Posthuman Feminism. Please help me welcome Rosi Braidotti.
Very much. I don't know microphone. That's interesting. Thank you very much, Mariana, and thank you to the Institute for Comparative Literature Society, the current director, Lydia Liu, and the previous director, my good friend, squatting on the floor as he showed study. Thank you very much for getting me back to Columbia. I started my career as a young, just graduated person at Reed Hall in Paris, so my connection to Columbia is ancient and very deep. And wanted to make a comment about the knighthood story, because having a website makes one transparent. To give you the good news that in my generation of the women hitting 60s, we're getting quite a few dames and knighthoods. I'm thinking of the recent order Dame commanders of the British Empire conferred upon Marina Warner. And just last Christmas, Henrietta Moore, who's also an out lesbian, a member of the European gay bourgeoisie. So it's sort of a very interesting evolution in terms of class relations in the old world. And just to get this out of the way, you can address me as Sir Rosi anytime. So I thought in 5 minutes, a lot to say, trying to go beyond the book. Please buy it, it's great. Thank you for organizing the sale. And trying to take your Posthuman a little bit further than I do in the book. Hope to keep it within 50 minutes, if not shoot me. Open windows, get oxygen, and to the virtual people out there, so sorry you couldn't be here, see you later, bye. So the topic is embarrassing. The Posthuman is an embarrassing topic. One cringes with embarrassment, thinking not another post. We have had them all, including the horrendous post-democracy. Do we have to have another one? So I share in that embarrassment. I'll give you my answer in a second. Second embarrassment, with all the horrors going on in the world, with the high toxic levels of inhumanity, should not that be the center of our concerns? What are we being posted and postal again? So let me get this meta-methodological remark out of the way immediately. I don't see the Posthuman as a generic category, and certainly not as a concept. It is a navigational tool. In Deleuze's terms, a conceptual persona. In my own work, a cartography. It's a cartographical tool that allows us to illuminate aspects of the present. It allows an engagement with the present operationalized through strategic readings. I have been a student of Foucault. I sat on the floor at his lectures and not breathing, just like you today. So the idea of a cartographic rendering of the present is the methodological question. How do we access the actual moment? We, people of humanities and social sciences. We can go through big data, we can do all of that, but we don't. It's not our methodology. How do we critically access the present, knowing that the present is accumulation of horrors, injustices, and indigestible, nauseating facts that we are essentially opposed to. So it is the oppositional consciousness engaging with aspects of the present that we're actually opposed to that we are trying to frame here. And the cartographic method is a series of theoretically based, politically infused reading of the present that allows us to account for a number of shifts in the conditions of production of knowledge. So we have the subjectivity, the discursive political economy, the necessity of framing, understanding what is happening to us. There is the construction of an us as a navigational tool, a conceptual persona. It's in a sense an empty shell, but it allows the constitution of illuminate new fields and new areas. I would argue that the insane, the mad, the gay in Foucault's work are conceptual personas, they're figurations. They do not pre-exist the discursive engagement with them that we collectively do in order to frame the political economy of production of knowledge in the present. So materialist methodology framed by what I call the embodied and embedded, situated and accountable structure of thinking that is, for me, the great contribution of feminism to critical theory. Embedded and embodied, situated and accountable perspectives. Speak from somewhere specific. Don't do the God's trick. Get a life, as they say in Australian English. Radical immanence, if you want to be radical chic. Politics of location, if you know your feminist theory. Adrian Rich, 1984. The reformulation by Donna Haraway in the early 90s, situated knowledges. It's all there. It's an incredible punchline, and it hasn't been taken seriously methodologically. In this phase of my work, I am taking this punchline of feminist epistemology and going into the world with it, sort of striking left and right as I go. You can enter this discussion through the whole genealogical story of Foucault. There's a wonderful seminar on this campus run by Bernard Harcourt on Foucault. You have ample material, and you can also enter through the teachings of my other great master, Gilles Deleuze, about the importance of a radical immanence and radical empiricism, to be empirical and grounded without being reductive. So this allows the combination of critique and creativity. You need a conceptual persona. I would argue in the nomadic subjects, a conceptual persona is not an empirical subject. The feminist philosopher, which is the topic of Patterns of Distance. What the hell is a feminist philosopher? Dissertation written in the late 70s at the Sorbonne. It was the second dissertation defended after the one of Rosi Braidotti. It was an incredibly controversial one. The feminist philosopher. Conceptual persona, navigational tools, figurations that allow you to bring into being, to actualize and extract from the mass of discursive production chunks of thinkable, conceptualizable, visualizable knowledge. So that's the take, and that's what we're trying to do with the posthuman. And so I would put it into all kinds of brackets and launch an appeal for different figurations and different formulations. And Deleuze did teach us that the only way to do philosophy is through conceptual creativity, the inventions of concepts, and that cannot be done without massive intervention upon language. If you do a quick search on the web of what is happening institutionally with the posthuman, you will have a field day. And go to Oxford, see what they are doing, and the institute is called, Oxford. The institute is called the Institute for the Future of Humanity, because of course. The concept is transhumanism. The leader is Nick Bostrom, a man who is loaded with millions of research grants. And the project is superintelligence, and brains, computer interface, neurophilosophies, analytic philosophy, and robotics, and millions of finances. We're talking about Oxford. Cambridge has replied with the Institute for the Assessment of Existential Risk, run by my friend Hugh Price, and they are really debating about what is the future of this posthuman predicament. So we're not talking about bush colleges here. The main universities on earth, apart from your own, that are really debating the question of what exactly do we call this particular moment of a redistribution of our shared understanding of what counts as the basic unit of reference for the human. So if you can just do, in our case, a quick institutional search for those of us who are in that game, it's absolutely clear and what the stakes of this are. Theoretically then, for me, and I summarize quickly because it's all in the book, the posthuman moment in my cartography is a convergence between two discrete but related events, post-humanism and post-anthropocentrism. If you are at Derridian, they go together. Fantastic at the Derridian because of the linguistic thing. Everything always hangs together because everything is text. This is less so in the materialist school of post-structuralism. The genealogies are quite different. The critique of humanism, you may remember, has quite a different genealogy and political history than the critique of post-anthropocentrism. In fact, I would argue that as social thinker, critical thinker, we don't even have a relationship to ourselves as a species. And I will challenge this by showing you some images, if I can get out of it alive. I've been rehearsing since 6 o'clock this morning, so I double-clicked. But it doesn't come up. I was told to, so start from place from start. Got it. So, him. Remember him? Okay, exactly. Your laughter says it all. Our laughter has buried him. The Vitruvian ideal of a certain type of humanity, skillfully combining mental attributes with physical perfections, a drop-dead, gorgeous white male, you've got to be kidding me. Da Vinci going off his head, we all know about his sexuality, representing an absolute ideal frame of reference for what counts as human, for what we ought to aspire to, mens sana in corpore sano, blah, 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 absolutely relentlessly anthropocentrically, unrepentantly Eurocentric, and utterly ideal. This is not even remotely close to the human average of any gender or ethnic group. It's a fantastic fantasy. Since, I would say, late 60s, we have been going at him. Feminism, post-colonial race theory, and environmentalism has had forms of anti-humanism that are simply part of our culture. And I think poo-pooing this guy is part of what we do. I remember one generation of my teachers, Lucy Rigaray, early 80s, writing a phenomenal article called Equal to Whom? Equal to him? Women who aspire to equality lack ambition. Feminism of difference, the feminism of the teachers that formed us, known as the post-structuralists, postmodernists, whatever you want to. At the same time, of course, the statement is preposterous. If you contextualize it in the real world and in the real condition of women, little girls, LGBTs across the globe, we have an increase of violence, of deprivation, of marginalization that is really problematic. So here we go. Is it possible to be consistently anti-humanist if you are in the business of social justice, human rights, creative? Almost impossible. Contradictions meeting us at each step of the way. And if you are a rigorous thinker, contradictions are a problem. If you're a Deleuzean rhizomatic thinkers, contradictions are part of the game. They don't matter at all. Do I contradict myself? Then I contradict myself. Salman Rushdie, we cannot simplify that which history has made complex. Our relationship to Eurocentric humanism is one such complicated one. We cannot expect to resolve it, but we can engage with the contradictions. Jean-Paul Sartre's introduction to Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth, 56. Humanism in the West has died at Auschwitz, and I would add Hiroshima and Nagasaki, terribly important for Deleuze, terribly important for Michel Serres, a genocide that is understudied because it is our genocide, of course. The reason as humanism, well, European humanism has died with those horrors, but it has not died in the rest of the world. Asian, African, Ubuntu, variations of non-Western humanism are up and running. Fanon himself, Aimé Césaire, all of the tradition of black Buddhist variations, David Bowie humanism, another god that we have to come to terms with, rest in peace. Other humanism, non-Western humanism, the impossibility in a sense of post-colonials, thinkers, anti-racism to say, do away with humanism. Am I a human too? If you're not particularly part of the human race, if you've had to fight to actually be recognized as human, are you going to give away that category that easily? McKinnon's controversial, interesting, I will say nothing as thinker, in the book, Are Women Human? If we haven't really made it full-time into humanity, do we give that away so easily? Remember Olympe de Gouges, French Revolution, the Universal Declaration of Women's Rights. Beautiful. She sent it to Marie Antoinette. She was sent to the guillotine immediately. Thank you. Claiming basic human rights for women, killed on the spot, dead on arrival. Sojourner Truth, over 100 years later, from the blackness and the slavery issue, saying, am I a human woman? Do I count? So that tension, that absolutely searingly painful tension, is something that we cannot resolve easily. In my political culture of far-left, post-Cold War European feminism, inspired by the upbeat, utterly crazy Californian manifestation of the second feminist wave, I think we operated effectively and often not even consciously a form of disidentification from the human race, a deep form of see if I care, look at my face and my bother, to quote my favorite stand-up comedian. Deep, profound, and you find it in the music, you find it in the text, you find it in the slogans, you find it in the Scum Manifesto, if you haven't read it, the early terrorist text of the second feminist wave. You find it in the jokes, and Rebecca West, the more I know men, the more I appreciate dogs. I always get dogs in the first statements in favor of animal rights. My favorite feminist joke, sorry to the people in the seminar, if you can put one man on the moon, why not all of them? I think it's fine. I'm like Jeff Bush, please laugh at me. Disidentification, something of an affective political economy that you can only understand afterwards. And like you've taken leave from a category that you never fully belong to. I do believe it is a first world position because it does imply a certain amount of confidence and security. And if you were risking your existence, taking the distance, probably we wouldn't have done it. But the vitriolic, satirical, upbeat Nina Hagen would have been one of the figures. I do this in the lecture that I did for the Pussy Riots. If you go online and you look at my encounter, Judy Butler and I, with the Pussy Riots, we did a lecture for the girls, and my lecture is on feminist rock and roll. And I was very glad that then Nadia and Masha said that these were also their feminist heroines, Nina Hagen being one of them. The punks, these extraterrestrial alien others, David Bowie, coming from other spaces, another humanity, I want out. So there is an exiting here, a longing to be out that I think we have to put into the picture. It's an anti-humanism of an affective order that we haven't quite focused upon, but which is very central to political culture. There are elements of this in the scholarship, and the scholarship that focuses on, for instance, feminist science fiction. I'm thinking of Marlene Barr's very early study of feminist science fiction, which was picked up by Barbara Creed, study on the horror of the feminine horror, the horror of the feminine, picking up from Kristeva, which is being picked up by the queer Humanities today, which goes a sort of a radical equation: women, LGBT, animals, blacks, post-colonials, bacterial, others, extraterrestrials, united against white men. Anything rather than white men. And that equation, sometimes now white women thrown in as well. See what's happening to poor Hillary Clinton, a monument of a movement that doesn't seem to be able to make it. You're going to get Donald Trump in return. That's not all the chapter. Okay? But I think you have it all there, an exiting from a tradition of feminism. Let's see if I can go to the next one, but I have to here. Where, in fact, there is a type of feminist universalism. And feminist universalism, I know it's a very interesting picture, which I picked up 2 years ago. Two things about the whiteness, utterly overwhelming, and it's commercial. It's a commercial for a global coffee firm. And I will return to this corporate universalism if I make it to the end of the lecture. If I start like this, we'll be here till tomorrow morning. But the idea that there is a recomposition of a universalist, pan-humanist order through corporate humanism. And I think this white femininity is absolutely part of that. But can a woman represent the human remains a question, with all the limitations notwithstanding. Can the human be represented by a female of the species? It's Simone de Beauvoir's question. It is also Ray's question. I think it's Jack Halberstam's question. I'm very glad she's coming. He's coming. I think that is the question that we need to continue asking, all other differences notwithstanding. Post-anthropocentrism forces us to question further our allegiance to the species. I'm grateful to Donna Haraway for the image. Can we imagine a representation of humanity that would not be anthropomorphic or anthropocentric? Could decentering anthropos, decentering bios, be the premise to a redefinition of how we understand our place on Earth? Can the naturalized others, animals, insects, plants, cells, bacteria, in fact, the whole planet, constitute a point of reference for a new redefinition of the human? Why are we sort of looking at this saying, no, this cannot be? And we have to hold it here again, and then come back to the point I made before. We don't even have a language to speak of our species belonging. We don't stand in front of the mirror and say, I am against capitalism. Yes. I am against patriarchy. Yes. I am against compulsory heterosexuality. Yes. I am against the human species. Oops. It's not the same. It's not the same utterance. And I think that profound sense of belonging to a category that we cannot adequately think about is one of the issues here. Darwin is missing from critical theory. He was burned at the stakes by the Nazis together with Marx and Freud. We got Marx and Freud back after the Second World War. We didn't get Darwin back. Not in the humanities and social sciences. Coming in now, late, badly perverted, missing. Partition, biology, sociology, social sciences, biology. Michel Serres, whom I love and adore, says that that was one of the effects of the denazification program, that we had to put biology way out of reach because of what had been done during the Second World War in the name of the naturalization of racial differences, and before the Second World War, dress rehearsal in imperialism and the colonial expansion of Europe. Biology was suspect. Naturalization of differences was suspect, was untouchable. The methodology was social constructivism. The Soviet Union, I always confuse the European Union and the Soviet Union. Soviet Union detested anything biological. It really is the social constructivism that is the philosophy of post-war Europe, because organic, holistic vitalism was the philosophy of fascism. And I think that division of labor in my part of the world is absolutely crucial. This is why when Deleuze takes up monism through Spinoza and brings back the natural, is really bringing in authors who were contaminated by Nazism. Nietzsche, the poor guy, it wasn't his fault, it was his sister, the horrible Elizabeth, but nonetheless. Bergson, and this is why Foucault, in a rare moment of generosity, sorry Bernard, but so it goes, in the preface to Anti-Oedipus says that Deleuze accomplishes the denazification of European philosophy, cleaning up concepts that took a very wrong turn before the war. The philosophies of life, being part of nature, nature-culture continuum, they went wrong. It's no reason to let them go. We've got to clean them up and bring them back. Why? Because we are in the centuries where bios and biogenetics are dominant discourses. More on this in a minute. So we are lacking a set of terminology. In fact, there is a sort of a missing landscape in our minds. And I think if you read people like Michel Serres, who is the closest of that generation to science, he's trained as a physicist, and he knows his science, and you realize that there is something here that we are missing, like we're missing a limb. The inability to think of ourselves in neo-materialist terms, using a hermeneutical kind of naturalism, as if the worst possible nightmares came up with it. I propose as a clinical approach here, the denazification effort and long shadow fascism. Maybe we're scared at the moment we say naturalism and extermination follows, but isn't that an interesting set of association? Nature, naturalism, extermination, genocide, sort of racial cleansing. Whoops, maybe this is history speaking through our collective unconsciousness, and all the more a reason for going with critical tools into this nightmare situation and draw out the concepts that we need. We have in feminism incredible figures that can help us do this. I call her Planet Haraway because she's a galaxy of her own. Extraordinary, extraordinary. One of the great geniuses of the great feminist tradition. She did it all. She did the Cyborgs in '85. A subtitle which has disappeared in the reprints. A feminist socialist manifesto for the 1980s, in the times of Margaret Thatcher in our part of the world, Reagan in yours. Socialist feminist gone out. But it's crucial, that subtitle, absolutely crucial. She did Animals before anybody else. The generosity, the craziness, the inventiveness of language, the loyalty, the collegiality. I think she's extraordinary. I don't know why she's not president of this country. But Donna always says that she is a failed humanist and a failed secularist. She seems to think that they go together. I'm a failed secularist and I'm a failed humanist. And the kind of love she has for figures like this, I think is for us a teaching path. She helps us detox from attachment to the species. So we have within the feminist tradition great pioneering figures that, like Haraway, who help us think this. A massive amount of kind of anti-humanism with a difference. I would call it post-colonial, racialized neo-humanism. We have inhuman queer theory saying too much violence, we can't let go of the human. And then we have my tradition, the rock and roll, see if I care, get me out of here, anti-humanism, that fishes up bits and pieces from Nietzsche and actually confronted by the demise of the human, would say what Monty Python says in The Life of Brian. Well, what has the human ever done for us?
And I think that is, I'm very careful in positioning myself because I'm very aware that this particular tradition is one of the tradition in a far more intricate landscape, but it is clearly mine, so I want to be accountable for it and then leave myself open to the multiple critiques. So if we add up the different attacks, so to speak, on posthumanism, post-anthropocentrism, there is no question that the figure of the human is officially in trouble. And I sent you to Oxford and Cambridge, and you can see it. You can go and read the great minds of today, Habermas and Fukuyama. That's not a great mind, but never mind. Sloterdijk, Derrida, and Boradori. There is a cognitive and moral panic about the future of the human. And what is very cute about the great thinkers is that they always think that the future of the human depends on them. It's like we are really very, like here, let me be worried about the future of the human. As if the answer could come from a certain paternalistic, benevolent acceptance that we have no consensus about what counts as human. But dear Mr. Habermas, in my political culture, we never did have a consensus. The human is a term that indexes access to power. It is not a universalist, a floating agency that governs the production of truth and meaning. It accesses power. It indexes power. Some of us have never been and have had to negotiate very hard for being a human. But the fact that officially we have this kind of anxiety about the human, Brian Masumi calls it X-Men. Donna Harwell called us man, the taxonomic type has become man, the brand, and Hart and Negri talk about an anthropological exodus from the category of the human. Well, finally, so what used to be a minority positions in the years of punk has now become a mainstream position. We have a massive exodus from a category. But then, where do we go from here? Conclusion to the first part, there is a posthuman turn. We have a posthuman predicament. If you add all of these factors up, look at the bibliography, at the work that is being produced, it's undeniable. We have discursive production, we have material practice, we have institutional concern, policy-making body, we have official cultural anxiety and panic. We have a problem. The problem is called the future of the human. And some of the answers that are coming up, the corporate pan-humanism that we saw in the case of the white female are very indicative. I hope I can come to it at the end. With this in mind, let's now turn to the feminist response to this. And now we are going to rock if I can get out of here alive. So escape first. Then we start by going to Shanghai. No, this is not what I want. Is Kajad anywhere here? How do I get to my bigger video? Alejandro, are you around? No.
Maybe right behind it.
There's a video. I know, so they open up here. Sorry, too simple. Okay. Lu Yang, one of the most influential young Chinese artists based in Shanghai, has studied with Symbiotica Lab in Western Australia, has represented the People's Republic of China in Venice, extraordinary creative, working on death, disease, genetics, and biomedicine. The piece that I've chosen for you is called Uterus Man. I don't know what we do with the lights. How do I make it big? Need some lights.
Okay, this is the trailer. I'll give you 2 minutes of the actual thing. It goes on for an hour because there is a voiceover. Just 2 more minutes of the actual. I don't need it very good. I'm so sorry, I know you want to go on, it's fabulous. I don't know how to shut it down, but apart from that, what do I do to shut it down? Now you want to go and watch it. Go online, it's on YouTube. Uterus Man, Lu Yang, it's phenomenal. You just do that. Okay, without further commentary, because I put them together, in a sense, the counter-example. We now stay on, there's a second film, leave it off, the second video.
Okay.
We now go to London, and we go to the National Health System. Very different artwork. Not that it's coming, but... Sue Austin is the artist that we're looking at. I didn't want the talk, I wanted the video.
Talk about my journey.
She's cute. No, I need the video. The video called Deep Sea Diving. Maybe it comes. Maybe she shows it. Sorry about this. We didn't have the time to rehearse. No. Can we call it? There it is. Okay, there it is. There it is. This is what you need to see.
Full screen is.
She just presented it. A bit more volume. It's a TED talk, so it's too bad. I think I did it wrong. You get the idea. That's just Sue Austin. Gotten to you yet? Can you stop it? Because otherwise you go into a Zen mode and I lose you. So let me see if I can. And I'll tell you a little bit more about her. And now the lights can come back on. Sue Austin. Again, young, started using a wheelchair in '96 after an extended illness had affected her mobility. Describes getting on an armchair, on a wheelchair after being immobile as totally exhilarating because you could zip around and move again. Enrolled at University of Plymouth in the UK for an MA, she started working on people's reaction to the wheelchair and the negative gazes that were cast upon it. And the idea for an underwater wheelchair came as she trained as a disabled diver in 2005. Borrowing equipment left, right, and center. The wheelchair is from the National Health System, and the scuba diving from a club that helped her out. The university pitched in. And when the Olympic came in 2010, she was commissioned, and the first piece of which you saw a small chunk. An extraordinary figure, by now quite an institution. You can see her TED Talk. So I wanted you to have
the spectacular media, post-punk, sophisticated state-of-the-art video stuff that most of you spend your life watching, and let's face it, and producing. Some of you have that double life. And then the less spectacular, but in some way more powerful, stillness of Sue Austin. And in both cases we get the question of mediation. Digital mediation in informatics and the whole culture that goes with it, and biomedical mediation coupled with informational mediation in the case of Sue Austin. So I would argue on the basis of just two simple examples, but we can compare notes, that we have here embodied and embedded relational affective assemblages for a posthuman subject that is a mixture of human and unhuman, of cultural and natural, manufactured and given, planetary, cosmic and aquatic. And this particular subject remains absolutely committed to issues of participation, of justice, and of something that we would call the most humanistic possible agenda, fairness and equal treatment, dignity, and while actually experimenting with wildly other ways of being human, female, other, embodied, and mediated. And so it is this type of assemblage that seems to me to be at the core of something that could be the beginning of a posthuman framing to feminist subjectivities, but it has to remain multiple and diversified. It has to bring in the nature, culture, the mediation issues, and it has to have incredible skills at representing digitally, musically, visually, logarithmically, the lived experience that it actually embodies. It's a sophisticated piece of assemblage, and it is absolutely not a simple given. To complicate it, can I have another 5 minutes? Yes. I wanted to complicate the argument because otherwise it's too simple, by framing this in the context of what we could call advanced capitalism. And there's such a misnomer, because what if I do this, something happens? No. It is a barbaric system, so I need to pull this out. I don't know what's advanced about advanced capitalism. The anatomy of it, of which I will give you a little slither, comes from, I think, the book that gets advanced capitalism, which is 1000 Plateau of Deleuze and Guattari, the textbook, as far as I'm concerned. And out of the complex anatomy that they give you, this political system, I will choose just a couple of features to build up my case about what kind of feminist posthuman subjectivities are we confronted with. But the question of technological mediation, double mediation, informatic and biogenetics. The two videos are completely spot on. Embodied, embedded, but always mediated. Mediation as the new ontology. That is a cultural divide that for the baby boomers may finally be the moment where we learn to actually go home. I am the tail end of the baby boomers, so I can speak for a few more years. But digital mediation, it is really like the Gutenberg press. It simply cuts an epistemological break across the community. And there's no point talking about digital natives. Mediation is the new ontology. And why is media studies the only place where we have 350 students in the first year? Philosophy has 7 in Utrecht. So, and why do we still call it media studies when it actually is the philosophy of today? It is the way in which we are embedded and embodied. Look at you. How many of you are now recording, taping, talking to somebody, texting, twittering? Hello to everybody out there. The rhizomic multiplication of your faculties. To even call this media, it's your life. It's who you are. There's no way that we can detach you from those engines. And that is the difference between my generation and yours. I respect it, I love it, I'm a bit scared of it. Please teach me. Please reverse the roles here. Because if I can stay offline, I am a happy chick and put on my music. and get off this stuff. But for you, unimaginable. One of my lovely ex-students, Francesca Ferranda, who sent me flowers today. Hello, Francesca. Francesca, to disengage her from media is like she would actually have a claustrophobic fit. She would choke. How many of you choke with anxiety when you don't have telephone coverage? Do you even go to places where there is no coverage? I don't think you do. You have a list of black lists of places where you never go. Mediation, even just that. But we need to inscribe this into the perverse political economy of advanced capitalism. A global economy that, in fact, makes the mining of information its core capital. And the mining of information is not only post-Snowden, Facebook-oriented, hello, Mark Zuckerberg, you have made that guy into a very rich man by giving away your information. Not only all of that, but it is, of course, the farming of biogenetic information about all that lives. Monsanto is the legal owner of the genetic codes of most grains on Earth. And as you know, they genetically recombine them so that they can only actually yield produce for 1 year, so that the third world farmers then have to buy them again the year after. Vandana Shiva, biopiracy. Wonderful. Biopiracy, the theft of life. But it is life that is the capital here. Life as surplus. Melinda Cooper, Sydney, the Sydney School of Marxism, the studies knows so well. Extraordinary stuff. Student of pattern of growth of all the greats. Life as surplus, life as capital. Nick Rose, residual, neo-Kantian, post-Foucauldian, but working well from LSE, King's College London, on the new capital, bio-codes. Informatic codes, biogenetic codes. The videos of our feminist artists spot on this. And what do we know about life? How much of it do we own? Columbia University Biogenetics. The whole biogenetic of North American universities. Cognitive capitalism requires the data mining that our highly intelligent researchers are producing on a daily basis. We are cognitive capitalism. We are right in it every second of the day. And to imagine that there would be something outside this intrusive complicity between us and technology is to be delusional. And we are part of this. And I would argue in this respect that the cyborg, the cyborg has become our dominant feature. I had here as the representative of the data mining. You will find all of the images in the book, and the farming of life. Vitruvian man become a trademark, becomes a brand. I had to pay money for this. It's from The Guardian, they even charge money. Cyborg, a banality. Difficult to find a good ethnically diversified cyborgs and whiteness. There's something going on there with the racialization of this that is really, really problematic. Every time I go to new media conferences, everybody is white. And every time I go to a race conference, nobody does media. Can somebody please do something here? I think one of the features of the contemporary situation is this new reorganization of knowledge. There would be another paper, but a missing link. And I wanted to put him in the picture because I'm a bit sick of the cyborg being only that. Oscar Pistorius, white South African, had to fight because he's got his prosthetic legs to be recognized as a human and run the Olympics in the normal Olympics and not in the Paralympics. He became a symbol of otherwise embodied people's struggle to be recognized as human. He did, he ran. He didn't win, but he did extremely well. Normally born, do we call them normally born? How do we call them? Bioorganically, biblically generated bipeds, people with 2 legs from birth, called out in discrimination, saying he has better carbon fiber legs, and I, a humanoid born with, do we call the normal? We like the sort of officially recognized legs, and being discriminated against. So it was a struggle. After which Oscar Pistorius goes home to South Africa, beats and kills his girlfriend. And then you get the Oscar Pistorius court case, really generating out of this. I chose to finish my book on the Posthuman with him and the runner Bolt Hussein, the two runners of London, and asking the question, we do not know what enhanced bodies can do, but the case of Oscar Pistorius also proves unequivocally that high degrees of technological mediations do not solve issues of violence, of injustice, of dominations, of genocidal tendencies. In some ways, they even enhance them. So I cannot rest in peace, although you're really suffocating here, without adding into the factory, into the cartography, the necropolitical aspects of advanced capitalism. Necropolitics, Achille Mbembe, but before him, a whole tradition of negritude and black racial thinking that shows the homicidal character of what we would call the Enlightenment progressive dream of advancements of humanity through science and technology. And in the world of today, you cannot talk of science and technology without bringing up issues of security and surveillance. We are at war. We are at war globally against an invisible enemy that we have generated ourselves. I found this image after the book came out. The Vitruvian Man has become the homegrown terrorist, the image of horror, ready to strike at any point in time, anywhere. And as Masumi says, it is just a question of time. It will happen. And I don't have to say this in this very wounded and traumatized city. So we need to factor in technology in the form of high-level global surveillance and the kind of wars that we fight, and wars that are non-humanly driven, in the sense that they are fought by drones, that are operated by pilots, as you know, thousands of kilometers away. The one who killed Gaddafi, that is in my book, was being operated from a base outside Las Vegas. The plane that killed him was flown from the Sicilian base of Sigonella, just outside the coast of Libya. These are the wars that we fight, and it is not only the stuff that Homeland and other terrible television series are made of, it's the reality. And again, cognitive capitalism is involved in this. University of Utrecht does some of the maths for the algorithms, for the laser work, for the drones. I hate to think what your universities and our American universities do for the war effort. We are part of it. Part of the posthuman condition is the deep inhumanity of the time, but that inhumanity takes the form of a specific use of science and technology. The informational codes, people call it algorithmic culture. And the group that I work with at Goldsmith talks about the importance of setting up algorithmic cultural studies, again requiring media knowledge, requiring advanced understanding of the technology in order to make sense of the sort of general political economy of this. It's not all glamour, it's also glamour, it's deeply entrenched with forms of dying and forms of new ways of thinking. I'll go quickly because I see Mariana being so the inhuman is a component. I come from a world, Europe, where the crucial issue at the moment is mobility, enforced mobility, controlled mobility, whereas goods and data and capital flows freely, humans do not. And to call it the refugee crisis is to not even begin to do justice, not only to the scale of the issue, but to the necropolitical governmentality that is generating this crisis to begin with. And the United States, with that unfortunate war that destabilized the region, I think has only taken 7,000 of the refugees that are emerging from a region that is incomplete and is crucial. I think there is a wonderful book here by, again, a Columbia professor, Saskia Sassen, and called Expulsions, on actual dispossession, eviction, as standard practice of advanced capitalism. You have dispossession and evictions in 2008 with the Lehman Brothers crisis. You have it in Syria. We have it in the outskirts of Paris. It's part of this inhuman political economy. Refugees, disposable bodies, inhuman others, question marks, forms of mobility that forcing us to look at the cartographies with incredible care and incredible attention. Being legal today is a real position of power. Being registered today is a power location. We need to understand the almost ubiquity of detention centers and points of entry. Schiphol Airport, which turned out to be a massive prison when we had a fire there years ago, and the inmates died. One of my team, I entered the country in about 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, one of my team had a stamp from Iran on her passport. That took 10 hours at Kennedy. She had declared it. She had declared it to the American embassy. She said, oh, don't worry about it, 10 hours. We had to bring in the Dutch embassy from Washington to bring up borders. And then I think here you have another wonderful teacher that comes regularly, Etienne Balibar, the bordering, the invisible walls, a lot of them electronic, a lot of them digital, a lot of them simply surveillance codes that detect where we go. This is part of the post-human condition. It redesigns the function of the alliance between feminism, media studies, post-colonial and race studies. A new alliance is needed here, made probably, but that we will have to see, on the algorithmic question, on how do we encrypt differently, protect ourselves, or as Bernard Arnault would say, resist and take ourselves out of this in a new form of artisanal resistance. So this is the new cartography, and I want to conclude by saying that obviously we are in this predicament together. We, however, in inverted commas, is not one and the same. We is more than ever a nomadic subject. It is complex, multi-layered, internally contradictory. I argued that the global economy, in some ways, by marketing everything that lives, creates a sort of opportunistic post-anthropocentrism. The Human Genome Project is over and done with. We need far more intricate types of stem cell research, which your country is not good at because of fundamental Christianity, but we are very good at it in Europe and China. New forms of recompositions of what constitutes the human. And there is a farming of the genetic codes of everything else. We are really at the moment not just exploiting what exists, we are creating new life forms. Whether you write codes or you do stem cell research, you're creating life. How sustainable, what for, these are all the questions. But if we agree that there is an opportunistic post-anthropocentrism, a kind of a cognitive form of capitalism, then the question is, what can we possibly do about this? We who are at the center of it. That question needs to be the post-human critical theory question. And instead of having that question put at the center of my culture, what I see in my cartography is a great rush towards forging neo-humanist togetherness. We are in this together. The Anthropocene, the climate change. We are in this together. I call this corporate panhumanism. And I am very, very skeptical about it. But remember where I'm coming from. I'm coming from anti-humanism. Remember the cartography I gave you. It has a long history. I could start from the Coca-Cola ads of the 1970s. Go and have a look at them online. I want to give the world a Coke to keep you company. It's the real thing. What the world wants to see is Coca-Cola. That was the 70s. I'm going to give you the 90s version, which is the brilliant work of photographer Olivier Toscani for the mega corporation Benetton. I don't have to tell you what you're looking at. You're looking at corporate panhumanism. The chick with the blue eyes, whatever, the gorgeous brown individual, and in the middle, sticking up his arm just in case you have any doubt where the future is, China, Asia. Message, we're in this together, covered. But the same type of commodity fetishism object that happens to be a Benetton jumper, terrible stuff, they've been making them for years, and recomposition of a pan-humanity, sort of in a hurry to recompose and to ease off historically lacerating contradictions. And il faut le faire, as they would say in France, to put this in your face. And coming up with the banality of only one race, the human race. This is the moment where I actually beg to differ. And with all respect for any variations of neo-humanism, I want to resist this hasty recomposition of a we that is flattening out all other differences. And I want to ask for radical immanent philosophies that allow us to do justice to the complexities of the different locations that we inhabit. And on the basis of those complexities and differences, install dialogues based on the assumption of difference and diversity, not of a sameness. In some ways, we are not in this together. And you know who says that with an eloquence that took my breath away? His Holiness the Pope. In the conference that he did on climate change last year, when he invited a pretty funky keynote speaker. Do you know who the Pope invited? Naomi Klein. To say, we're not in this together. There are lacerating differences. And in addressing this question, more than ever, the history of feminist thought with a careful, pained understanding of how complicated situated differences are, more than ever, the world needs feminist epistemology and feminist theory. We have done that work. We can slot it into the discussion. We can say that there are multiple and contradictory ways of becoming posthuman today. But what is new? It was always like this. Only now, all of a sudden, paradoxically, we are in this together. Thank you very much.